A lot of people, they're going through life and they never quite wake up.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Peter O. Estévez Show, and this is your host, Peter O. Estévez. Wow, what an exciting day today. We are today in the state of Florida with none other than my great friend, Tim Storey, and a great friend, Celina Belizán, the co-founders of a movement that we are creating called Excelente. And today, we gather for the very first time to actually create a mastermind plan to develop what we call a movement. And we're going to talk about that. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Tim Storey. Tim Storey is an entrepreneur. He's the author of the best-selling book, New York Times best-selling author, best-selling book, The Miracle Mentality. He's also a life coach to the stars, celebrities, and many other affluent people throughout the world. Celina is an expert in conscious parenting and an incredible human being and entrepreneur and a venture capitalist, angel investor, and many, many other things. Hello, Tim.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Tim. Hello, Celina.
Hello, Peter.
Welcome to the Peter O. Estévez Show. Tim, Excelente.
Yes, but we need to know what O stands for.
Oh, absolutely. I am a middle child. I am one of 13. And my birth name is Pedro Octavio, which is Octavius.
I love that.
Number 8.
Oof,
number 8.
Powerful.
Of course, Estévez. So the O stands for Octavio. And I think my parents did that so they knew what number I was. When they had so many children, they lost count. Okay.
No, but I love it.
Yeah.
And I love the name of the show.
Thank you so much.
It has a lot of weight and a lot of power. So I'm excited about this union that we have in this gathering here in Miami. And you said something very profound when you talked about, we are talking about this movement. It's a very bold statement. So when you make that statement about it's a movement, what goes through your mind?
Well, Tim, that's a great question, because there have been many a times that we've been asked, what is Excelente and why are you doing Excelente? And I don't want to get right into the deep of the reason this movement was birthed, but it is a movement because I think in order for us to be able to move our cultures, our generations forwards, you can't do it by making a change. You can't do it by making a statement. You have to create a movement. You have to actually get to the root of the issues that have been holding us back as individuals. Dive right into it, inspire people for they to understand what is it that has not gotten me from point B to got me from point A to point B, but it's not getting me from point B to point C. Okay?
I love that.
So we need to inspire people, we need to educate people, and then we need to transform people. But you can't do any of those without doing one or the other, right?
I love it.
So the creation of the movement is to identify, inspire, educate, and transform 100 million people by December 31st, 2028.
Yes.
And, it's a bold statement, as you said it, but the reality that we created this movement is because of my own personal experiences, your own personal experiences, Celina's own personal experiences, and the story of many people that we have met collectively along our life journey.
I love that.
So with that in mind, the idea was birthed to create something where we could identify individuals that we can then inspire, educate, and then transfer to go back into the community and educate and inspire other people to do the same thing. So that's the idea of the movement.
So how did this amazing woman become part of this whole scene?
Celina and I have been friends for a short period of time, but we have developed a deep and profound friendship, and we found that there was a lot of commonalities in our journeys in life. And Celina has an incredible passion for serving others. I remember the very first time that I hosted a room in Clubhouse, and Celina came on the stage, and we were talking about creating an event. It was not a movement at the time. It was creating an event to identify people that we can empower, help, transform, change, right? Because of my own personal needs. I think we always create things.
Yes.
going back to the issues that we face in life,
No doubt
right?
about it. Mm-hmm.
And I never forget when I brought Celina back on the stage on Clubhouse, and she talked very passionately. She says, I don't know what you're doing, and I don't care what you're doing, but I love what you're doing, and I want to be able to support it in any way that I can.
Ah.
That was a bold statement that she made. She may or may not remember that, but that's what she told me, and that stayed in my mind. And we developed a friendship from there, and here we are today in Miami talking about the movement and actually rolling out the movement, planning out what the mission, the next steps of the mission, how we're going to execute on the plan. Celina?
Interesting that you say that, because what I remember, if you ask how I got into all of this, it's actually one of the things that I think is so important that we will cover in our events and in our teachings. It's how to get from A to Z as quickly as possible.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, whether it's because of my life, or whether it's because of my ADD, or whether it's because of all the personal development, things I've done, I always say, don't ask me how to do it, but just know that I'll get it done, and I'll get it done as efficiently as possible eventually. Not initially, but eventually. And so he doesn't remember this, but I reached out to Peter because I wanted to do a podcast. And so I started to interview different people that can take you from, this to that in 14 seconds and for $1 million. And I called him up and I said, listen, I have a feeling that you're someone who gets things done in the fastest, smartest way. That is I'm the scrappiest person. I will figure out how to do something in 30 minutes that would take me 3 hours if I didn't figure out that one little thing. I thought he might be that one little thing. And so I said, would you be open to just having a discussion with me? Of course. And so we had a few discussions, and ultimately I showed him a contract of a couple other people, and he was like, this is garbage, this is garbage, this is garbage. You know what, I'm gonna help you do this, I'm gonna help you do this. And we kind of just started to put it together. And since then, he's been a mentor of mine, a coach of mine, a freaking amazing friend in person, and here we are.
Which I think is so powerful, because, something that you do well in life, and you're extremely smart and, well-versed in so many things, but to reach out for help is what a lot of people don't do.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that is part of, Peter, what you're good at, is that you have really become a pioneer, in my opinion, in so many ways, in real estate, business, working with people, and now a pioneer in this space. I've been in this self-help motivational space for 40 years and 75 countries of the world. But one reason I'm involved in what we're going to be dialoguing more about in a few minutes is because I love going places where other people have not been.
Absolutely.
I really love the road less traveled. Mm-hmm. And I think that really life put us together in such a unique way, with similar gifts but different gifts, and we needed all of these gifts to do what we're about to do.
I love it, Tim. You said, both Celina and you said a mouthful right there, and I want to touch on a couple of things that Celina said. I notice how my mindset even thinks today, even after reaching a level of success, I still want to go from A to B and then from C to B. Yeah. And Celina spoke at something very, very, very powerful. She said, how do we get from A to Z? Okay, yeah. Forget all the other steps. And the reality is that probably I went back into a default mode, a default mentality, a social conditioning, a limited belief, okay, that is exactly why we started a movement like Excelente, because I didn't learn how to go from A to Z, okay? I had to go through the school of hard knocks. I had to figure out that I got this far, but once I got there, I was stuck.
Yeah.
I was stuck. I didn't know how to get to the next level, and everything that I had built, I was sabotaging. Okay, and I was sabotaging because I had not done a lot of the work that I needed to do in order to be prepared for the next level. Mm-hmm. Okay, and to your point of not asking for help, I was too embarrassed to ask for help. because I had reached a certain level of success where my immediate community, those people around it, my top 5, okay, which is something I want to touch on, was somebody that I could control, manipulate, and have be my posse, have be my cheerleaders, have be the people that looked up to me. Because I wanted to maintain that status of success, you know, in a small island. Okay, and that in itself was what was holding me back from being able to reach the next level, which is something that we learn in personal development. Tell me who you're, you know, we become the total sum of the 5 people we are surrounded by. Okay, and very early on, I did not realize that I needed to be surrounded by people that were smarter than me, that were able to get me to the next level. I needed to stay in my small circle in order for me to feel empowered. Okay, so those are some of the beliefs that I was conditioned, okay, to adopt from at a very young age. You know, by the age of 5 years old, we have already adopted 50% of what we're going to learn in life. The other 50% we will learn through the rest of our lives.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so when I talked to you about Excelente, I actually went to meet you and talk to you and interview you for the podcast at the time. Coming Clean. You had just released American Mentality, and when I read the book, I read my story. Okay, it was lived by Tim Storey in a different state, in a different country, at a different time, at a different age. Okay, but it was the same story, and I was trying to figure out. I was the basis of the American Mentality was to be able to travel, okay, into life and become a miracle, be a miracle, and then pass on the miracle. So tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about your story.
I think that, as you're saying, you know, some people, we live by either design or default. And design is that there's a blueprint, a plan, a scheme, a direction that your parents help you to go. And that a lot of us, we started in default. And so with me, it wasn't as bad as your situation. We had 7 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, and yours was more. You had how many people?
13 plus mom and dad, 15 people at a 900 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bath.
Just amazing. Yeah. So we were cramped, crowded, confined. But we weren't just confined in a space, we were confined in the mind.
Yes.
And so my father had a 10th grade education, my mother a 6th grade education. My father struggled with addiction, alcohol addiction. So really, it didn't look like it was going to get better. It didn't look like someday Tim Storey would speak to 85,000 people at a time in one crowd, be the youngest man to speak to U.S. Congress on spiritual issues at the age of 28, and then do all the things I've been able to do and be working with you guys now. So it did not look that way. It looked like I needed to fix the blame. That's what most people do. So most people, when they live in default, they say, whose fault is my default? But what happened to me is my 6th grade teacher relabeled me. I was a white guy, 6th grade. My teacher said, Timmy Storey, you are brilliant.
Wow.
You are brilliant. And because you're brilliant, I want to see if you want to consider checking out one of the books from my personal library. And I chose a book written by a guy named Irving Stone, who I later met his wife, Jean Stone. It was on the story and the life of Michelangelo.
Wow.
And when I read this book about this man being so creative and what he did, it just reminded me of who I was supposed to be. And I went for it.
Wow. Wow, wow. What an incredible story. Celina, conscious parenting. Tell us a little bit about that, how you got involved in that, and how does that relate to the movement that we're creating?
Okay, so conscious parenting, the way that I got involved in it is the way that a lot of people do. So the parenting is almost a hook. You know, parenting can bring you to your knees. There's that quote that you're only as happy as your least happy child. And my daughter had a rough start to life, and was in the hospital for 100 days, and we then hoped she'd be okay, but she was born 2 pounds, didn't quite breathe for a while, all of that. And I had already gone pretty deep into personal development. I had been coaching entrepreneurs, but segued more into the personal development aspect of business. And when I had this daughter and I had this family and I had, all of my systems and all of my, mantras and all of my rules and all of my pep talks I gave myself, none of it worked, because all of a sudden I was no longer a party of one. I wasn't even a party of two. I had these little people that desperately needed me. So I tried getting into parenting and learning all about that, and none of that worked. And then I just kept going deeper and deeper. I learned about the brain, I learned about everything. And conscious parenting, what's so interesting about it is that times in your life where whether it's facing basically rock bottom, those are always opportunities to start bouncing back up, or we keep going and we keep going and we keep going. Oh, yeah. But with parenting, most people will not give up on their kids. So, it's interesting because everyone talks about this party of 5 and the people that you surround yourself with and all of those things. But what about when you don't really have a choice of who you surround yourself with? When you're not willing to leave your family, when you're not willing to leave your kids, but you're not willing to live in a state that you are selling yourself short, that you are not living up to the reason why you were created, and that you're walking around feeling like a fraction of yourself. A lot of times you can leave your town, leave your church, leave your parents, leave your college, change your sex, you can do whatever. But you have to stay with those kids. It's often a great opportunity, and that's what brought me into it. So I figured out a way. I was like, I will not wish away this child's life. She was 2 years old, and I was sitting there just looking at the clock, and I thought to myself, I'm literally wishing away her life. I got to find a way to not wish away her life, but to make this moment exactly how it is, imperfect, with me in her crib and her projectile vomiting because I can't even leave the room for 2 seconds without her going bananas, and her sister over there that I haven't seen in 18 months pretty much, because this one is blah, blah, blah. But I needed to figure out how to make this moment exactly the moment that I would appreciate and be grateful for no matter what, as I'm picking vomit out of the floor. And that took me down a long road of really understanding how this all works. How it works. How do we become the way that we are? Why do we feel the way that we feel? And why is it so hard to logically know what to do, but when you're in those moments, you can't always apply it? And for me, it was pretty life-changing, understanding all the different components, in addition to understanding how the brain works. And once I kind of had the formula from all these different schools of thought, only then was I able to see how to function as a
I think it's pretty powerful.
Wow.
Because I think from a life coach point of view, Peter, is that her instincts kicked in. And I feel like innately the mothering side of you, which is to guide your child, which is direction, to guard, protection, to govern, is it administration, is that it kicked in. But the thing that added to it is that she had tools. Maybe not the perfect tools, but she had tools. And I think that with people's lives today, that they too feel overwhelmed. So maybe it wasn't a child that could have died.
Yeah. It could be anything.
But it's something else. And I think for number one, Peter, is that sometimes people don't allow their instincts to kick in, and they just die. They're dead people walking.
Right.
Or that they don't have the tools.
You often talk in many of your talks, Tim, about life kicks you out and knocks you out. I forget the.
It knocks the shout out of you.
It knocks the shout out of you.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us what that means, and how are some people able to get up from that shout, okay, and make a comeback? And why is it that some people don't or won't? What is it? Is it a don't or a won't?
So I think that's a great question. I think that from my perspective of being around children, whether my friends' kids or speaking in a school or my own children, a lot of children, not all children, but a lot of children when they're excited, they have a higher volume. There's a volume. So at recess, I remember being a kid, the volume was always high. Or if the teacher left the class for just a minute, the volume went up. And so I started thinking about this. In life, why is it that so many adults whisper?
Yeah.
You know, they whisper and they whisper. How's your wife? Okay. How are your kids? Oh, okay. How's your job? Okay. How's your arthritis doing? Okay. And I thought, you know, life has knocked the shot out of these people.
Yeah.
So it's a play on words.
Sure.
Because you know, then their kids will then run in and like be shouting, and that parent is whispering. And so I believe that we can get our shout back.
Okay.
And that, you know, I look at certain friends of mine that are even in their 90s that are very together. One guy does Pilates, has a guy come to his house and stretch him. His mind is clear. He's in his 90s. And he still has a shout. So life can knock the shout out of you, your volume, but you can get your shout back.
And how prevalent is that knocking the shout out of you in the communities that we're trying to serve? And what begins that? You know, and I'm going to give you the example of my household. You know, and first and foremost, I want to acknowledge something. Mm-hmm. I do not blame my parents for anything for the way I was grew up. I don't. In fact, I love my parents, and probably they have been my greatest teachers, because everything that they did, today I have used that as a lesson. I know what to do and what not to do as a result of my parents. You know, I learned my grit from my father, resourcefulness. You know, since my father had no resources, he learned to be very resourceful. So I learned that. I learned the ability very early on that, you know, there's no resources at home. So how do we how do I become resourceful to be able to acquire whatever I want? You know, I often say that many minorities, many immigrants, they're entrepreneur by default and they don't even know it. Mm-hmm. They are doing what Gary Vee talks about and Grant Cardone. They're doing the side hustle. Okay, well, you know, we've been doing the side hustle all of our lives because it was a survival instinct. It was the way that we learned to survive. You know, it was not a side hustle. It was a part-time job or whatever it was in order to be able to make ends meet. Okay, so how do we, as a collective, are able to take a movement like Excelente and make sure that we implement some type of teaching that is going to help that family recognize, okay, that there's an issue and then change it in the household so they don't lose that shout.
Yeah. So I think that whenever we go through any problem, number one, you have to become awake. And again, I think that a lot of people, they're going through life and they never quite wake up. So you have to become awake. Secondly, you have to take inventory. To take inventory is to really take a real look at what your life is like Celina, for you and your daughter. One, you know, we don't know if she's going to live or die. Then you have to tend to your other daughter, right? So you have all these family things you need to do. So she had to take inventory. So you wake up, take inventory. The third thing is, and here comes the power, you have to partner with the right people.
Wow.
Partner with the right people. And that's not what my father did, and that's not what my mother did. So again, no put down on their parental skills or their strength or their lack of, but they did not partner with the right people for a long time. So we stayed where we were for a long time. Later in life, they started to find better people to partner with, but until they did, they stayed in the state of crisis.
Right, and I think a lot of that had to do, Tim, with the fact that we often talk about this among the group, is the fact that even this conversation has been democratized, right? Has been digitized, has been demonetized, right? Access, the access to information is mainstream today. So there's information that our parents didn't have access to
at all.
Okay, at all whatsoever. There was no do-it-yourself type of belief. There was no YouTube where you can Google how to raise a parent, a child consciously, right? Yeah. There was not a podcast that people could listen to. So there was the age of information has completely changed. You know, we get 50,000 sound bites plus or minus on a daily basis, where maybe the same amount of information it took our parents to get in an entire lifetime to do. So there's a lot of so there's a lot of factors that have changed, but yet there is a segment of the population, okay, that still doesn't reach that information, doesn't have access to information, not because it's available, but because I truly believe that there's something that is blocking them from receiving it.
Good point.
Okay? Can we span on that a little bit?
Yes, but because you've done such extensive research on this, what do you think the reason is?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with our social conditioning, right?
Okay.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are still continue to operate with the same belief system that we inherited from our parents, okay?
Yes.
From our grandparents, from our great-grandparents. So it keeps being passed down, but no one has stood up and broken that cycle. Okay?
I think you said it perfectly. So also, you could throw in the law of reproduction, that like produces like.
Right.
Okay, so you plant an orange seed, you're going to get an orange tree. And so, you know, that's what's happened with us, the law of reproduction. Like in Celina's life, your life, my life, we probably did a lot of things that our parents did or our aunt or our uncles did, just because that's what we viewed. Yeah.
Well, and we still do it. I mean, I cited that example right at the beginning. I took A to B and B to C, and Celina came in and said, no, how do we go from A to Z? So that's part of a belief system, right? And I think one of the reasons that my life shifted completely when I started digging into why do I behave the way that I behave. Why is it that I achieve everything that I want as far as material things and success? I have achieved that, but yet I feel like I have a hole in the center of my soul. I feel like I'm completely empty. There's nothing. There was not enough alcohol. There was not enough women. There was not enough sex. There was not enough cars. There was not enough suits. Not enough ties that would fill that hole. I continue to feel empty. Okay? And my realization happened in 2008. After I had been sober from alcohol for 8 years, 10 years or so, and I remember vividly Googling, how do I become a better person?
Wow.
Okay? I was a good person based on the belief system that I had adopted. Okay? But at the same time, I was repeating the same patterns of behavior just on a 14,000 square foot home, not on a 900 square foot home.
Wow.
Okay? But the same mindset was still operating. I still operated with scarcity belief system. I still operated with limited, with money blocks. I still operated with negative energy within me. Okay? I woke up very robotically. I still lived in a state of survival, as we talked about often. Okay? It was just at a different scale. You know, I still got up and I thought that working hard equated to being successful. I thought that working hard equated to being smart. But I didn't take an opportunity to learn who I was, where I came from, or how those negative patterns of behavior were affecting my ability to become more successful than I had, or accomplish more than what I had accomplished.
Yeah.
Or even worse than that, how did I prevent my son Alec from becoming me or becoming his grandfather? No disrespect to my dad that I love and respect tremendously, but how do I stop that cycle?
I think it's amazing that you even woke up, because if you're in a house that big and with all those cars and everything else, it's easy not to wake up.
Oh, of course.
You could have just gone all the way through. Celina, when did you start figuring out that life had other options besides the ones that you had been living or seen other people live?
So for me, I always felt like there were options. I always felt like there was more, but I felt blocked. I felt kind of going through a fog a lot, and I am so cerebral, and I spend so much time really kind of trying to dissect and go through these things that it got to the point where it was frustrating because I could know the reasons why. I could understand what had maybe gone wrong in my childhood, or what had gone wrong, because it can be so subtle. The experience you had with the teacher that said you were brilliant. When I was in 6th grade, I messed up the Scantron or not 6th grade, like 8th grade, messed up the Scantron on something, and they were convinced that I had done it on purpose, and but to me, it meant I was really had a problem, and use words that we're not allowed to use anymore, but those were the words that were said about me, but so for me, it really started to change when I realized that just because I feel something and just because I have a feeling does not mean that it controls me. It was learning that things will come up. I don't need to understand them. I don't need to know where they come from. I don't need to know why it happened. But what I do need to know, that it comes from something that has nothing to do with what's actually happening right now. And for me, that was life-changing. It was so empowering, because we're taught something happens, I'm anxious. Okay, what do I do? What do I do? Who did I forget to call? Are my kids okay? Is my house on fire? Rather than, wait, I could just be having this feeling because that glass of water triggered a time when I was 5, and I went like that and it fell off, and my dad had a horrible day and got really mad and slammed his door, and it's 15 years later my parents get divorced, and that's all my fault. Mm-hmm. So that to me was such a shift, because we're so taught that, what are you feeling? It must be true. Listen to yourself, and that's great too, but there's a lot of people talking up there.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, because they were created when that trigger happened. And they're still up there doing their very best to help you, but they still think that you're 6 years old. And they're just not the most qualified for the job anymore. Mm-hmm. So that to me was completely,
But you notice how we all get emotional when we tell our story. Like she's feeling emotion, you feel emotion, absolutely. I feel emotion. Because, really, all this stuff could have sunk us.
Sure.
And it did,
yeah.
right?
And it did.
Until it didn't.
Yeah.
I want to go to you, Peter, for a minute, because out of all these great conferences that I get to do over all these years, you've come up with pillars and where we're really going to lay this foundation for this movement. And are you open to share a little bit of
absolutely. But I if you don't mind, Tim, one of the things that I want to do is, why did I feel, and then collectively we decided that a movement like this was needed? And I'm going to tell you why, okay, based on the conversations. When I Google, how do I become a better person, the very first thing that popped up in Google was Mind Valley. And for the people that don't know what Mind Valley is a personal development platform owned and operated by Vishen Likiani and then his wife, Christina Likiani. And I clicked the site, and immediately I started seeing people like Lisa Nichols, like Jim Quick, like Reverend Michael Beckwith, and an incredible slew of powerful thought leaders. And I signed up for every course. I was so desperate in my own skin, okay? Yeah. My own skin was so itchy that I was willing to take on someone else's skin, okay? And I realized for the very first time that I had been living on this island where I had begun to believe my own bullshit, okay? Yeah. And I had started adopting my own belief system that was actually intoxicating me even more than the addiction to alcohol.
Wow.
Okay? So when I started hearing that my story was not unique, my story was also the story, just in a different manner, in a different way, was the story of Michael Beckwith, the story of Lisa Nichols, the story of Les Brown, the story of many of the incredible thought leaders that all of us collectively know, right? And I realized that I was not a problem. I had a problem. And part of and for a long time, I wanted to bury my sorrows with alcohol or whatever, because I thought I was broken. I thought there was something wrong with me, and I was not going to be able to reach the heights of success that other people had. And that's what the first thing that I wanted to do, because I thought if I found success, that would fix my family, that will fix all that dysfunction.
Yes.
But wherever I went, there I was, right? So I Googled this, And then not only did I start, this is pre-COVID obviously, I started attending many of those events in person, a lot of those conferences, okay? And I noticed something very common, that among the people in the audience, I was one out of a handful, if any, of people that looked like me. People that talked like me. People that came from where I came from, okay? Meaning, you want to call them Latinos, you want to call them Hispanic, whatever it is. The ethnicity doesn't matter. What matters here is that I could not, although I could relate to some of the stories that Lisa Nichol would share on the stage, or Les Brown, or Jim Quick, or John Asser, or whoever, I still didn't feel an intimate connection. I still did not feel understood, okay? Yet, I often would see the guy that would, the wait staff or people that came from my country that would talk to me, and immediately there was a connection. There was a conversation. There was a commonality. Okay? And I would ask questions, what do you think about this? Well, I'm not really this and I don't understand it, but you all look happy. And so what I realized, first of all, was that the reason that my father didn't have an opportunity to be able to change and do better and be better was because there was no role models in his community that would pave the way for him to become a better individual. Everything that he saw around him was broken. Okay, so he followed a broken pattern system that he implemented into our neighborhood. Okay, but yet we see that the personal development space has been prevalent for many years. It has just been a closed society.
Very much so.
Okay, it's no longer like that. It's private. It is democratized. It's digitized. It's demonetized. Everybody can have access to the information. Everybody can have access to the teachings. But still, even with that access available, there's not leaders on the stage other than Tim Storey and a couple of others that we are going to identify, okay? Inspire, educate, and empower to be able to go back to their communities and teach those conversations. So there is no longer a Peter, a 10-year-old Peter, that feels that he has to follow the same pattern and dysfunction because he does not see anyone outside of his community that looks like him and understands him, okay? And that's why I was so inspired to say, I see a lot of these events and there's, 6,000, 12,000, 15,000 people, but I'm the only Latino in this room. I'm the only person. And I get it. I get what they're understanding. I'm going to do everything they tell me because I want to change desperately. But how do I take this back to my community so they can change too?
That's so powerful. And it's interesting, as I look at all three of us, the look of Latin people could be so different. So
absolutely.
Let's talk about, our backgrounds for a minute. So my mother's Spanish. So from Spain. My father is black from Cuba. So I'm Cuban, black, and Spanish mother. And then you would be what?
I'm Mexicano. Okay, and my father, my grandparents were from Spain. My grandparents on my mother's side was from France. Okay, but they migrated to Mexico many years ago. And my mom and dad my father was born in Houston, Texas. He was an orphan at the age of 13 years old and was taken back to the family members that he had in Mexico. So he grew up in Mexico. 3rd grade education, my father. Mother, 6th grade education, raising 13 children.
And then if I would just look at Celina, the first time I heard her speak Spanish, I was in shock. She was talking to her kids. So your background is?
We're originally from Argentina. I was raised mostly in the U.S. and my parents, my dad's there now. My mom's here with me. And, I grew up, I'm actually an interesting case in this because I grew up in a house that was an Argentine house. My parents only spoke Spanish. My brother eventually answered back in English. Still, if you see my mom and I speak, she speaks 100% Spanish to me, and I speak 60% English and 40% Spanish. My dad, I love him to death, and he'll see this, but he has horrible English. So I tell you this, I only speak Spanish to him because if I start speaking English, he immediately changes to English, and it's impossible. And so I only speak Spanish to him. But for me, I grew up in where a lot of these things were really subtle. And then going back to Argentina and learning more about what they experienced, escaping a country. I have a cousin who like cousins who don't have parents. When I went back and learned about what they had been through, only then was I able to understand so much of what happened in my life growing up, because it's all very subtle, and these ways that you learn are often really, really helpful until they're not. And even when you were talking, I was thinking, well, in my house, my dad was always, he worked a ton, worked a million hours a day because they came here with nothing, and then he learned that work was the way. Even when he didn't need to do that anymore, and he still works. But never bothered me, because as a female, if he ignored me, I would just cry, and he'd be like, oh, whereas my brother would be like, and go upstairs. And even just those things that you learn how to do can be really so subtle but so haunting for the rest of your life until you can take inventory.
Yes. So we look different as Latin people.
Absolutely. We come in all colors and all shades. And that's the reality. And really, if you look at what is Latin, I mean, there's Latin America, Central America. We have Brazil, which is, questionable whether they are Latin or not. We have Cuba. We have, and I didn't say that but because
I'm from Argentina.
So I mean, but then we have the islands. We have Puerto Rico. We have Dominican Republic. But the reality is that the cultures are so similar, and the belief systems are so similar, and that's really a lot of the belief systems they have. In many ways, I look at some of our belief systems, including religion, that were created so many years ago, so many centuries ago. But like every system, it needs to be revamped. I spent a lot of time working hard, but I never spent any time revamping my thinking system until it was completely shot, until it couldn't do anything else for me. Okay, I kept the same operating system for 30-something plus years, and then when it just jolted, it froze. Is when I actually Google, how do I become a better person? And the reality is that today we don't need to do that. Okay? We can tend to our systems, the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the financial, on a daily basis.
Yes.
And that is the basis of the 5 pillars. That is the basis of how I believe we exit, how we believe collectively today, how the movement believes, that those are the basis of stepping out of that cycle of survival, okay? Stepping out of a dual way of thinking, conscious, subconscious, and entering into a single state of consciousness, okay? Where you are no longer time traveling, worrying about the past or worrying about the future. That's what we learned from our parents. They were worried about something that was going to happen or hadn't happened, and we started blocking the energy and storing negative energies within ourselves that did not allow the good, positive energy to flow through us.
That is so powerful. And this thing that you are about to talk about is that we can live at an excellent level. That was never the option.
No.
So like at our house, we had one cereal, Special K. But I remember going to a family down the street that was of a whole different nationality, and they had options. I'm like, what are these options? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I remember we used to watch the same type of TV shows, and over at my same friend, there was a show that this guy, his name was Jacques Cousteau.
Yes, I remember.
And he would do underwater stuff, right? Yeah. He was a scuba diver. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's so cool. He's got his stuff. Yeah. He goes underwater. But we didn't watch it at our house. But this idea that we can be excellent in all areas of our life, right?
Absolutely. You talked about we were not thought to be excelente. We were thought to survive and not to thrive. It was always about survival, okay? We were taught to fly or fight, not to flow. And when you operate from a state of flow, you're operating in an excelente state of being.
Yes.
Because now you have the clarity to be here, present in the now, to be able to have a conversation and allow ideas to flow, and you're not distracted by the problems. You're not distracted by things that have happened, will never happen, okay, or could not possibly happen. Okay, but we were taught in our households. Okay, you said no options. Heck, you know, one cereal. In our household, it was pass me downs. 13 children, whatever didn't fit the older children went to the ones next down. That was recycled 13 times in that household. Think about that. Okay, so my whole mindset for a long time was scarcity. So I was afraid to stop working and to invest in myself to become a better individual, because if I stopped working, I was going to stop producing and I was going to go back to my poverty mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, when in reality, I was living in a poverty scarcity mindset and I didn't even realize it.
I love what you're saying, and I think that some would ask, okay, who are you three to start a movement? And I think that what happens is sometimes people hear the cry. You have to hear the cry of somebody who is looking for something. And all of us have always been people that hear the cry of somebody who's looking for something. And that's what all three of us are. We're called to a cry of people who want to live an excellent life. And so, who are you three? We are three humans, flawed, have had failures, have faults still, but we hear the cry, and we're willing to answer the call.
Absolutely, and we're not only humans that have heard the cry; we lived in the cry. I often talk about how I saw my father work really hard, never accomplish anything. But he accomplished, what he did accomplish was teaching all of his siblings to be hard workers, to have a commitment, to have grit, to be resourceful, to not give up, to not to surrender. So even in his own special way, he was teaching us things that are incredibly valuable to us today, okay? Just in a way that I didn't have the other component, and the other component was the emotional intelligence to understand that, number one. And the personal development to understand, well, I don't have to apply the way my dad did.
Yeah.
I often but talked about my mother. My mother used to spend, I remember I would come in about 8 o'clock at night from either playing outside or part-time job. And my mother would be in her rocking chair praying, and she had her rosary, okay? And she just going down through the beads. And I would often say I was very cynical. Okay, and I would say, what the fuck does she pray for?
Yeah.
Our situation never changes. The reality of that is that's how I felt at the time. But if you look at our lives collectively today, my mother's prayers were answered. Here we are today.
She's a good prayer to hit all three of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Her.
And I'd also add one other thing, because with the whole conscious parenting thing, a huge part of that is that your child, at least one of them, is there for your evolution, and you're there for theirs. And I don't mean to guide, I don't mean to do this. It's that what you saw is being mirrored back right now with this movement.
Yes.
And for that, it's actually he created the movement.
Yes.
Because that's how you evolved to exactly where you are now, passionate leader about this very thing.
Well, who am I? Who am I to even call upon two incredible human beings to come together and create a movement that will change millions of people's lives across the world for many generations to come? I am that person that is. I'm not doing it for me. I'm answering some of my mother's prayers. I'm respecting my father's creed. But more importantly than that, I have a responsibility to the community, okay, that brought me here, that helped me become who I am, whether they realized it or not.
Very powerful.
Okay?
Yeah.
And now I have a responsibility with great with great knowledge comes great responsibility.
Yes.
Okay? Once you know, and you cannot keep that to yourself. I have a responsibility to go back to our communities. We have a responsibility. You become Tim Storey, you become Celina Belizán. We have collectively a responsibility to take back and awaken those that have not been awoken just because they have not had an opportunity to have access to this information.
And I like that. And the reality is we're not going to do it in timidity. We're not timid about it. We're going to do it in boldness.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that makes a great team, is that one person plays one position, another person plays another. We all three of us play three different positions, but have a similar mindset and a similar heart.
Yes.
And so I think that the collective of us three coming together with boldness. So expect the shout. So all you people that are watching, this is not going to be a whisper movement. There's going to be a shout. You're going to see it everywhere. It's going to feel like everywhere at one time. And you're gonna see a movement. You're gonna see change. You're gonna see excitement. You're gonna see families restored. You're gonna see dreams coming true. You're gonna see people truly networking with each other. Families really coming out of situations, because the time is now. And there's times and seasons for everything, and the time is now for this movement.
Celina?
He took the shot out of me.
He took the shot at him. Well, he's incredible at doing that. You know, if you never heard Tim Storey speak, you're in for a treat. You know, he literally brought the shot back into my soul, my heart, my mind, my body, and my spirit. You know, the very first time that I saw Tim Storey, I was literally holding on to my chair. And I often say, and I joked about this, I was like a little girl, like a little groupie at a concert, and I wanted to throw my chones on the stage. You know, I want to take this opportunity to thank you both from the bottom of my heart for believing in this movement, for joining the movement, and for making it a reality. Thank you, Tim.
What a privilege.
Thank you, Celina. Thank you.